I always start these by explaining who I am, what I do, what these classes are all about. I teach drawing fundamentals both online and at an animation school, and I want to teach online as well, or teach more online. That's what these classes are all about. They give me a chance to teach in a way online that's more similar to what I would do in the classroom, but this is as similar as I can do in the classroom for free. So these are one off lectures where I go through a topic and try to handle them like I would in class. And the difference between this and just like a regular YouTube video is that this is supposed to be more interactive. Whereas like a regular YouTube video is just information going from me to you. This is hopefully going to be more of a back and forth because I think that's better for people to learn. That's what I do in the classroom. So if you have anything to say, please just interrupt me. In class, I have social cues. I can see people, I can see people's faces. I know when it's time to stop talking and to let other people talk. I don't get those online. So if you have something to say, just say it. Don't worry about being rude. If you don't want to talk on the mic or you're on YouTube, then just type in the chat and I will read it out as soon as I see it and respond that way. Um, Today's lecture is on observation versus construction. So before I get into this, let me ask you guys, what do you know about these topics? What is your experience or thoughts with observation or construction? Observation is 2D measurement relationships. Construction is 3D form. I I think observation is 3D as well, but I understand where you're coming from because you're observing three-dimensional space unless you're working from a photograph, which is arguably not observational drawing, but that's actually we'll talk about that. I try to use both. One supports the other. Observation is really underrated in art communities, I think. Yes, I totally agree with that, and that's why I'm doing this lecture. Because um, if you go online and you look up drawing fundamentals, especially if you go to Reddit, you end up with something like this a lot of the time. And let me know if this sounds familiar, because I learned to draw well before any of this stuff came out. So I'm trying to make sense of what's going on with beginners. So you get ideas like this. First, you draw boxes and uh, basic shapes, as they're often called, which is not what they are. Then you have your basic shapes be more person shaped, and then somehow it becomes a person. It becomes anatomy. Um, I got this image from How to Draw an Owl. Yeah, I got this image from somebody on another Discord where they don't know I'm a teacher and I'm just some random dude on the internet to them. This person was a beginner and they were explaining that this is the idea they got about how to learn art from researching beginner materials. That first you have to draw boxes, then you shape those forms into, you can't draw people without mastering boxes. Then you shape those boxes into the subject you want to draw, and then somehow that turns into the subject. I might be preaching to the choir here based on the chat. It seems like this, but other people might watch this, so I am going to explain this anyway. Um, and I think you know where the problem is. I mean, there's a lot of problems, but I think you can see the biggest problem is this step right here. This is the draw the rest of the owl movement. No amount of being good at drawing boxes will allow you to know what anatomy looks like. So the thing about construction, I want to be very clear that I'm not bashing construction. I teach construction in my college level classes. It's a very important skill. The problem is that online, people take construction completely out of context and treat it like it's all of drawing fundamentals, whereas it's just a tool that you use as part of a larger context. And I think the reason for that is just the nature of social media. Things that read clearly and are read clearly visually and are easy to understand that way or easy to transmit spread much faster than the more nuanced information, whether it's correct or accurate or not. So I don't know who made this image. This is what somebody sent to me as their plan on how to learn to draw. This is what a beginner sent to me on their plan to learn to draw. I I think I don't know if this is true, but I'm guessing as somebody who makes art tutorial content that this whoever made this image, this was not supposed to be a step-by-step tutorial. This isn't suggesting that people learn boxes, learn these forms, learn anatomy. This is suggesting that you can use construction to build up from simpler ideas to more complex ones. Or you can think about these forms as you're drawing anatomy, not that this is step one, step two, step three. I don't know anybody who draws who works in these steps without having done a whole bunch of other drawing, or they're doing it to illustrate a point. But because this reads clearly, because it's relatively easy to understand, it gets spread around. So construction is a pretty old concept. I can trace it at least back to Bridgman. It's probably older than that. I don't think he invented this idea either of using simpler forms and building up from them to draw from imagination. It's a good strategy. It became popular online a few years ago with Drawbox, with Peter Hahn, and this comes from the Art Center School in Pasadena, California. And it works, it does work really well in context of other drawing skills. But that gets online, and then through a game of telephone where the message gets passed down through from experienced art teacher to YouTuber who took the class to YouTuber who didn't take the class and doesn't know how to teach to Reddit commenters, and just getting lower and lower fidelity and more of the nuance stripped out, then you're left with what Reddit calls drawing fundamentals, where you just draw boxes over and over again until somehow you're good at art. And does not work. Not only does it not work, it makes things a lot worse for beginners because they end up thinking that they know how to learn to draw and not actually learning how to draw. The other problem with construction is it's abstract, which is useful when you're drawing from imagination. You're abstracting your ideas into something that's more real. But if you're trying to draw from observation, that abstraction is actually a problem. You end up looking for boxes and cylinders and basic shapes where there aren't any, and it's confusing for beginners. I mean, it's confusing for intermediate artists when you're trying to draw a figure and like, where is this box? I don't see the box. The box isn't there. The box is abstract. So I got permission to share these from the artist. These were posted on the Discord group. And this is a fantastic example of how construction doesn't work for beginners and how it actually can make your drawing worse. So the forms are decent, right? Like these do look like boxes, but this figure doesn't look like a stack of boxes. These boxes don't represent the figure very well. Um, and it's actually the problem is that we're looking for boxes instead of drawing what we see, which would be much more accurate. So this is where observation comes in. Observation is drawing what you see, being able to capture that in your visual experience in an image. Um, and seeing itself is a skill. Experienced artists see much more nuance and see much more accurately than beginner artists. But if no one ever told you that seeing is a skill, you might not know. It's not apparently obvious. It seems like you see accurately. And there's a bunch of vision science for why that is, but I probably don't want to get into. But if you don't see well and you try to use construction, you're abstracting something that's incorrect. The observations you're making to build your construction is wrong, so your construction will be wrong, even if you're doing the construction right. So in this example, let's look at some proportions here. I'll use the head as an example. The head compared to, let's say, the leg. So the head, let's go from the waist because it's easier to mark. So it's one in the drawing, it's one, two, 2.5 heads. Actually, this might end up being more right than I anticipated, even though. And then in the, oh no, it's way off. So from here, it's one, not even 1.5. Way off. And this is normal for beginners to make this mistake. But it's harder when you're trying to think about boxes and proportions at the same time, and you end up getting distracted. You can see the same thing here, where we have like the feet are aligned, feet are not aligned, like that. These kind of things. The hand is in front of the neck. Hand is way over here. So it's getting it's incorrect observation is leading to an incorrect drawing, and the structure is not helping in any way. This is why observation is, in my opinion, more foundational than construction. When schools like Art Center teach construction, I mean, I guess I don't know for sure about Art Center because I've never been there. But when I teach in the program that I work at, when I'm teaching construction, it's alongside observation. I'm not the one teaching observation, that's the life drawing teachers, but I know that they are teaching observational skills so that the students are constructing it based on better seeing. I started figure drawing 2 weeks ago, and angles and proportions are really hard to get correctly. 100% agree. It takes a lot of practice. And visual measurement is a really good way to do that. I have a video on that, and it's in my textbook, but that's not what this class is about. That is an observational thing, though, so important to recognize that. Sorry, where was I going? Oh, yeah, so if you already have solid observational skills, you can abstract your observations into construction and learn from it that way. If you don't, you're building construction off of a very shaky foundation, and it's going to end up being pretty wonky. So, what if instead of trying to abstract this, I just drew the shapes that I saw, or just the proportions that I saw? Not worried about boxes. I'm not even really thinking about the subject matter. Just drawing the lines and shapes I see in the photo. So, which is more accurate? This drawing or this drawing? Now, this isn't really the most fair comparison because I have decades of experience and I'm comparing my work to a beginner. But I think if this beginner attempted this, they would have much better results than this. And this isn't, I mean, this is me speculating, but this is me speculating based on a lot of experience teaching beginners that oftentimes beginners come in having, or the people I get in my mentorship come in having learned this kind of construction stuff because they go on Reddit or they go on YouTube and that's what they taught. That's what gets taught there. And I have them do observation instead, and their work just jumps. It gets much better immediately just from changing the goal. Um, but what I just did, that doesn't look good in a tutorial. Let me know if this rings true to you as well. But construction feels like a shortcut, or it looks like a shortcut when you see it done in a tutorial. Someone can tell you to, like the Loomis method being the classic example, someone tells you, draw. I haven't actually used the Loomis method in a long time, so I might get this wrong, but draw a circle, then draw a line through the circle, then you attach the jaw, and there's that side plane, and then there's these lines, and then there's the draw the rest of the owl movement, or moment, but it turns into a face. And if you don't know better, it looks like all you have to do to be able to draw this face is to learn the steps, to draw the right shapes. So all you have to do to draw faces is to memorize the right shapes. Is this Does this experience ring true to anybody else's experience of art tutorials or learning to draw online? I can see that's what most people recommend. Yeah, yeah, and that's true too. Like every time I go into beginner spaces online, this is what everybody's saying. Just learn this method, learn these shapes, and you'll be able to draw. Um, Loomis, the guy who came up with the Loomis method, he did not create the Loomis method for the way that it's being used now. Loomis knew that this is these kind of constructive approaches, these are like an outline for an essay that help you organize the information that you already know and structure it, and then you can fill in the rest. Um, that's why if you look at the book that the Loomis method first appears in, Successful or Figure Drawing for All It's Worth. I don't remember the exact page number, but it's like late 100, early 200 of pages where the Loomis method first appears after the anatomy section. He wrote the book for people who had already studied the head and then designed this simple way or simplified way to remember it and to structure it when you're drawing from observation. He didn't create it as a beginner or as the beginner way to study the head. And yet, through this process that I talked about earlier, where things get stripped of context on social media, that's how it's pitched now. And it frustrates a lot of beginners because they expect to be able to do this and they can't because they haven't studied the head. They don't know the information that they're simplifying. And how do you know the information that you're simplifying? You learn it from observation. So observation is much tougher to sell on social media. It's much easier to say, hey, draw a bunch of boxes, and then somehow magically that will lead to you being able to draw characters that you want. It's much easier to sell that than, hey, you need to look to draw things that you see, and you're going to be bad, but you need to keep doing it until you get good, and it takes a while. People don't want to hear that shit. People want the easy way. They want the shortcut. They want to just learn the right shapes. Um, so anyway, I don't want to just I don't want this whole thing to be me just rallying against social media art instruction, even though it does frustrate the fuck out of me if you can't tell already. Um, I do want to talk about what observation is and how it relates um, to drawing from imagination and to construction. And observation is really, simply put, learning to draw what you see. And that is proportion, that's describing form, describing light if you want to shade, this sort of thing. So that you're able to take these experiences, your experience of seeing proportions, your experience of seeing forms and edges, and your experience of seeing light, and describe it in an image. And when you can do this, you can use the same techniques you use to describe forms, to describe light, to describe proportion, to describe your own subjects. Um, it's not that simple, but it's a skill set that you would use. So what I'm going to do here is I'm not going to use any construction at all. I'm just going to I'm still going to start with bigger shapes that I see and proportions and try to figure these out, but I'm not using any forms, any abstracted forms. These are all simplified, but they're shapes that I see. And I'm looking for where these shapes are relative to each other. So this shape here, it about aligns with the elbow. So I had it too low, so I raised it up. And yeah, this is hard to hard to sell because it doesn't look easy because it's not easy. But doing construction well, also not easy. Doing construction is more skill on top of this, not less. So while I'm doing this, I'm not going to talk as much, but I want to hear from you guys what your experience with these kind of construction versus observation tutorials. Um, have you heard about observation? Have you? I mean, you've heard about construction. What are your experiences trying them? That sort of thing. So I just you couldn't see this because I did this with my pen, but I just compared the height of the head to the height of the leg. The leg is about two heads tall to check to make sure my proportions were about aligned. Um, I agree that learning how to draw what's in front of you is the first step that will lay the foundation for imaginative drawing. Thank you. It's hard to teach, though. It's hard to do, like you said. Totally agree. Yeah. Um, Actually, I don't think it's that hard to teach. Um, it's just hard to get people to stick with it. Like, if all you do is draw what you see, um, and you don't like start immediately with the hardest subjects, you will get better at it. So teaching it, there's you can teach it better, so it's not just brute force. But brute force works. Just doing it until you get good works, at least for most people. But that's not very sellable on social media. Like, hey, get out there and dive in, and even though you don't know what you're doing, don't worry, it'll work out. Trust me, bro. Um, I think I get biased by my own ideas of how things should look, which affects the way I draw stuff like a face. Absolutely. Yeah, this is one of the things that you learn when you're doing observation is that you have ideas of how things should look, and if you don't look carefully, you'll just draw those ideas instead. Like you think you saw it, but you just saw your own representation of it. Um, which is actually I didn't want to get too into the weeds with vision science, but that's actually how your vision works. That it is in a lot of ways a hallucination where your brain fills in information based on what it should be there from it thinks should be there from pattern recognition, and it gets it wrong. So you see things that aren't actually there, don't actually exist. Uh, I started and do most of my work with observation. I use construction to support, speed it up mostly. For me, pure construction is really hard right now. That makes sense. I think that's a good way to start. You're right about brute force, but everyone, including myself, want a shortcut. You've convinced me to just start drawing what's in front of me in consistent, disciplined way now. Wow, thank you. I'm glad. Like this is exactly what I'm hoping for from these kind of lectures. Um, Brute force is not the only way, but it's part of it no matter what. Um, so the way I teach this stuff, uh, when I teach observation, is it's mostly brute force. Like being honest, uh, just having people do it until they get better at it is the basis and always will be the basis. And I don't think there's any way around it. Um, but there are sub skills like how I was able to um, check my proportions. It's called visual measurement. And teaching that helps people get better at observation faster than if they just have to discover that through trial and error. Um, so that's how I have my students do a lot of observational drawing, and then I add um, isolated sub skills like visual measurement, like um, exercises that force people to observe more carefully, exercises that help people observe and describe form, stuff like that. And as they brute force it, they integrate these ideas that I add into the process. Um, so it's not pure brute force, but brute force is the the main driver, I'd say. It won't work without brute force, but it's faster than just brute force alone. Um, but it's also harder to sell because you do have to go in not knowing what you're doing. That's part of it. And it's an important part because when I explain the concepts like visual measurement that help people get better at drawing observationally, they don't make sense with just me talking about them. Or maybe they make sense, but you don't really understand them just from listening to somebody talk. You don't really understand these concepts until you use them to draw. Um, and when you're learning them, they make a lot more sense if you understand the problems that they solve. So that's why I and pretty much every observational drawing teacher that I've ever talked to about this, we just throw students into the deep end right away. We don't teach them how to draw and then have them draw. We have them start drawing and then teach them to draw as they're doing it. Which again, harder to sell on social media. Like get out there and struggle and then I'll give you the answers. But it works much better because when you get those answers, you know what those answers are for and you know how to apply them. Instead of here are all the answers, now go do it. That's a much more enticing tutorial. Um, I think a good example, this is an observational drawing, but of how I use that approach is in my storyboarding class, where I have them start doing boards day one. And there's a ton of stuff that goes into making good storyboards. A lot of the drawing stuff was covered in earlier semesters, but the like how to think about shots, how to think about the camera, placing the camera, how to think about acting, how to um, transition between shots in a way that is smooth and makes sense to the audience. It's a lot to cover, and I couldn't cover all of it and then have the students start storyboarding because they wouldn't be storyboarding until like halfway through the semester. So I have them start storyboarding right away, and they make all of these beginner mistakes because they don't know any of this stuff yet, and they're learning it as they go. So the first board they do is bad. Usually, some students are have more of a natural talent for it than others, but in general, their first boards end up being pretty bad. They make all these beginner mistakes, and this is actually really important because then when I'm explaining why we do these techniques, why like screen direction matters as a more specific example, they see, oh, okay, so what I did when I wasn't paying attention to screen direction, this looks bad. This is confusing. So they have the experience to understand the concept instead of you have this concept that doesn't attach to any real life experience yet, and then you have to go try to apply it. So that's also how I approach observational drawing. Um, I think that's all the points I wanted to make today. I guess I didn't talk about construction that much. We got 20 minutes left. Why don't I finish this drawing and then I'll talk more about construction. I'm gonna rush it a little bit so I have time for construction because construction is very useful. So I should cover that as well. Um, while I'm doing this, any of you guys have any thoughts to share about observation, construction, just art in general? Okay. Admittedly, kind of rushed at the end. Shoulders kind of wonky, but whatever. I don't want to get hung up on this. I think his head's a bit too much chin. Okay, whatever. Um, so construction, what construction is, and I think I've talked about this a little bit, but it's using abstracted forms as a stand-in for more complicated forms. So instead of all of these muscles and stuff going on here, I could use a box or like an egg shape for the rib cage. And the reason that construction is useful is because it gives you like a base to build off of. there's so much going on in a figure that it really helps to have something simple and then building on top of it, especially when you're newer to figure drawing or when you're newer to like learning anatomy and stuff like that. When you're newer to figure drawing, I think observation is the way to go. But once you've gotten better at that, I don't actually draw like this except for in demos, so it might look a little weird. But I did when I was learning, and it was very useful. It helped me learn to see the form, to see the figure in in 3 dimensions, um, and how to construct it out of forms. But it's also useful because you don't see anatomy underneath; you have to construct it. Um, I'm not sure what you mean by you don't see anatomy. Oh, like the skeleton. Well, I actually do see the skeleton, but that's another topic. When you know what you're looking for, you can see it. But yeah, that's another topic. But yeah, when you don't, having having that construction helps a lot. And I think having being good at construction is a good way to get there. The other thing that's really useful for construction is for drawing from imagination. Like when I have the figure in front of me, I can just draw the lines and the forms that I see. But when I don't, and I have to make it up, starting from the exterior forms is really tough. You have to know those forms really well to be able to do that. Um, Instead, if you start from more simple forms, you can figure out the larger three-dimensional forms and then have that as a base to build the details on. And when I'm drawing from imagination, I don't draw out every box like this and every cylinder, but they're there in my mind. And I can do that because I've drawn them out enough times that I know what they should look like. And this is where construction really helps. This is, I think, prime construction. The best use for it is to simplify things so that you can draw them from imagination more easily, and then you construct the details on top of that. And so this is this part. This is actually getting here. But I wouldn't be able to do that part if I didn't if I hadn't spent so much time drawing the figure from observation that I know what it looks like. And also I would probably start with, if I was not doing this as a demo, it would be drawing more gesturally, because this starting with construction can make things end up kind of stiff. But it's good it's good for learning. So ultimately, I feel like construction like drawing the full construction like this is training wheels. It's a thing you use to learn structures in a simplified way until you don't need them anymore. Until you internalize forms, and then you can just draw the forms. I think it's worth mentioning that construction helps when drawing from photos because it's harder to see space in photos than IRL. Yeah, I think that's true too. Um, haven't talked about the difference between observation from photo and observations from life. I'm glad you brought that up because I do think that's an important distinction. Because when you're drawing from photos, you can just copy the lines that you see, you can copy the shapes that you see. But when you're drawing from life, you can't. There are no lines, there are no shapes. There's just the three dimensional experience happening before you, and you need to translate that into your drawing, which is harder, and it translates to drawing from imagination better because there are no lines and forms for you to copy when you're drawing from observation either. You have to describe ideas like form and light, which is what you were doing when you were drawing from observation. This guy's a little wonky. I think his proportions are kind of off, but I don't know. This is like I don't normally draw starting with construction like this, so it feels a little weird to me too. Um, I imagine how a photo would look IRL when I draw from it. I don't think that would be possible if I didn't start drawing from life. Yeah, that's definitely true. I noticed that too. That I still think about the forms. Hips are too thin. Hips are definitely too thin. Um, but I was his like no butt. He's got the Hank Hill butt. I would I could flesh it out. Um, Now I'm gonna get demonetized off YouTube. Look at that butt. Oh yeah. Okay. I made it weird. Let's go back to boxes. Another thing about construction that trips up a lot of beginners is when you see me drawing boxes and cylinders, it looks effortless. Like, of course you can draw boxes and cylinders. Boxes and cylinders are easy, but they really aren't. To be able to do this intuitively, you have to have practiced this stuff. And just cranking out boxes over and over again, unless you understand the perspective that makes them work, it this one's as I say that this one's definitely a bit wonky. Unless you understand the perspective that makes it work, you'll keep getting it wrong. Like I see a lot of people, they get frustrated, like, oh, I can't even do the most basic fundamental thing about drawing. But it's not the most basic fundamental thing of drawing. You have to learn perspective to draw boxes from imagination like this. Now, I'm not using any vanishing points or anything because I've done this a whole bunch of times. Uh, but I couldn't do this until I did learn perspective and I did practice until this became intuitive. Um, so let me do a more straightforward box. I was getting a little loose with those. So here's my standard 2-point perspective box. Most good teachers say that boxes are advanced, not beginner skill, from what I've heard. I would say intermediate, but definitely. And I mean, it could be beginner. Like do this. Um, you could do this as a beginner if you learned perspective. But the problem is because of that game of telephone, people just think draw boxes and they just draw boxes without learning the perspective that makes them work, and then their boxes are bad, and they think they suck at art. When in reality, it's just you just need to learn the perspective, which I do think beginners could learn. I wouldn't recommend starting with perspective because it is very dry and technical, but there's no reason you couldn't. Um, a future lecture I'd like to see is the function of memory to combine construction and observation. I tried drawing portions from life and it blew up in my face, even though I use observation on photos quite well. Yeah, yeah, that is something I would be willing to do. Um, Absolutely, yeah. I'll. I would probably describe it as study more than memory, but yeah. Um, I don't know if it really fits in a full hour because it's a lot of it is just, hey, just do this and try to remember it, but because it's another one of those things that's kind of brute force. Okay, so I gotta wrap pretty soon. But before I do, let me open up to any questions or any thoughts before I close out. And while you're typing, since no one's been talking on the mic, I am going to do my pitch, and I'll read any questions either as I go or after that. Um, my plugs, I should say. So we do these lectures. I do these lectures every week at Wednesday at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. That's -8 UTC. Um, the best way is to be on the Discord. Then you can talk on the mic. So if you're on YouTube and you want to join, there's a link in the description. It's also we have an amazing community. I'm so proud of the group that we've gotten together of like really supportive artists who really just want everyone else to get better. And like people critique each other, people give feedback. It's always very positive and very supportive. We got beginners, we got pros, we got people of all experience levels. So yeah, I definitely would love to see you. Would love to have you join if you aren't already. Um, I've been mentioning a book. I have a textbook that's free to download that covers drawing fundamentals, including observation and construction. Go into more detail than I'm able to in one of these lectures. And you can find that on the Discord in the official resources channel or in YouTube. There's a link in the description. Um, there is a free course. The idea of the free course is it covers the information or like some of the information in the first chapter, and it's designed to help you develop structured study habits. So instead of just studying when you feel like it, you make a schedule, you know what you're going to do during that schedule, and you do it and in a way that leads to improvement. So you're working in new ideas, you're testing your ideas, or you're testing what you learned, and um, try to make it as similar as I can to being in a real life class. And then you can use those same study skills that you apply to the first chapter in the course to all the later chapters and teach yourself as much as you can on your own that way. Um, the premium experience is one-on-one mentorships if you don't want to have to figure all this stuff out for yourself, or you want consistent personal feedback. Then we would meet once a week. I'd tell you what to study. You go off and study it. You come back. You get feedback. And I have experience of doing this, so I know what helps people grow. So it's not, instead of just having this overwhelming mass of information that you get online, focus on this one thing. This is how you get better at it, and you just keep going and building. And my students often get a lot better pretty quick. So that's my pitch. Thank you for joining. This has been a lot of fun, and hopefully I will see you all next week or in the Discord. Bye, everybody.